Greetings, friends. I'm going to share some of what I've learned from reading this book, Daily Life of the Egyptian Gods by Dimitri Meeks and Christine Favard Meeks. And it's talking about the pantheon of the ancient Egyptian gods. Who were the gods? There were many of them. There were, in fact, thousands upon thousands of gods. As Egyptian history went on, they added more and more. How did these gods relate to the humans? How did they relate to each other? What were the stories associated with them? It's a complicated story, and the Meeks couple, they try their best to make sense of all this because there's different stories. They don't all say exactly the same thing, so it's not like there was an Egyptian Bible or an Egyptian series of a holy book where they lay it out and it's all pretty clear. No, there's all these different texts and some of them say slightly different things. But generally they were able to get a picture from those texts. Of course, we don't know everything about the ancient Egyptians. Much of the ancient texts have been lost. A lot of the stories come to us only partially. So as you might imagine, I am not going to give a favorable interpretation. I'm very biased against the ancient Egyptian gods, just like I'm biased against the pagan gods, because I think it's chaotic. And especially you can see this with these ancient Egyptian gods. They seem to me to represent nonsense, ridiculousness, is that a word? And they also represent perversity. They are perverse. They are degenerate. So let's learn a little bit about why that's the case. And I like a lot about ancient Egyptian culture. You might have seen my previous videos. I've discussed the ancient pyramids, ancient Egyptian history. So I'm not totally against everything to do with the ancient Egyptians. I'll read sections of this book, summarize for you the creation story. They do have a creator god, sometimes called Re or Ra. I mean, it gets very confusing because there's different names applied to different gods. He is not at all the Almighty. That is the most surprising, not surprising thing to me, but that's the most significant point I would take from reading this, is that the Egyptian creator god was pretty weak. He kind of sucked. And so in the creation story, there are these waters floating in the universe. The universe is just a bunch of this primeval ocean, this water floating in total darkness, in nothingness. And the creator God was there, but he was not there. So it's like a contradiction. He was there. He was not there because he was not conscious of himself. So him coming into being was him becoming conscious of himself. It's sounding kind of Gnostic, and that shouldn't be surprising. So it's all about consciousness, man. And he becomes aware of himself, and then from himself, he starts creating the other gods. He also creates mankind before he creates all of the gods. I mean, I guess he creates everything in the physical world, but then there's also other worlds where he doesn't create things. And he's always at odds with the forces of chaos. And then you have Maat, M-A-A-T. It is personified in a god, and it has to do with the cosmic balance, the cosmic order, which they saw as represented in the Nile flooding or not flooding enough, and everything needing to be in perfect balance in their world, and they applied that to the whole universe. So there's Maat, and then there's the creator god. There's Mound, which rises above the waters. He creates these gods. The gods rebel against him. Mankind rebels against him. Him or her, he's kind of androgynous, actually. He is referred to as male, but kind of with feminine qualities. Apparently the gods defecated, they urinated, just like humans. I guess sometimes it was rain, or sometimes it was minerals, or they ate food. Living gods, that is those who are not in the realm of Osiris, they particularly found honey sweet, although everything was reversed in the netherworld. So if you found honey sweet in the world of the living, The gods in the world of the dead would find it bitter, but that's beside the point. All the gods were descended from the creator god. The creator god had to masturbate to produce the first divine couple, a sister-brother pair, who then mated to produce offspring. Among the gods, marriage between brothers and sisters was the norm. And I must wonder, was this the norm in the Egyptian royals, in the so-called real world? It's not unknown for royal families to do that, to practice incest. So it seems like if you take the ancient Egyptian gods as an example, incest was A-okay. Now I suppose you could say, well, in the Bible, I mean, God creates Adam and Eve, and then they have offspring who mate with each other, so isn't the human race the product of incest? Yeah, that's a good point, maybe. It's not just stated explicitly the way it is here. They say further, the physical separation imposed on Geb, who was the earth, like a god representing the earth, and Nut, the sky, meant that Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, could not normally unite sexually. So, as a consequence, Geb, the earth god, filleted himself. This is just what's in the book here. I'm just sharing what's in the book. The gods began as monogamous, but over some time, some of them took multiple wives. Seth had 2 goddesses in addition to his wife. Horus had 7 concubines, but there was no polyandry practiced by the gods. So the male gods some of them could have multiple wives, but there weren't any cases of female gods having multiple husbands. The gods sometimes raped each other. Seth raped Horus. Even though Horus is supposedly the champion of the creator god's armies and the strong fighter, he was a weakly, sickly child. He was raped by Seth. In some stories, Horus does then rape Seth. Rape amongst the gods was seen as a demonstration of power. I mean, it's like prison rape today. I mentioned Hathor hiking up her skirt to arouse her own father, the creator god, to improve his mood so he would come back to the court. Isis, who's another prominent god, masturbates her son. I know I'm giving this all out of context, but I'm just sharing what stuck out to me, what caught my attention. Isis masturbates her son. Thoth, god of wisdom, has a headdress which is made from the semen of a god. The gods engage in homosexual sex to affirm their power over the other. But it also seems there were also father gods having sex with their sons, and their sons who were their heirs to power. And this sex in the Egyptian text was thought of as a spiritual bond, which rebirths or recreates any god which is heir to another. This is perverse. What more can I say? So yeah, in the creation story, the creator god, he becomes conscious, he starts creating the gods and the rest of the world. He creates his own body through his speech, and he also creates these, what they call snakes, which assist him in the process of creation. He needs a lot of assistance to do everything. He needs assistance. He can't do it on his own. And these snakes are created by him, but they're not of the world. So when the world comes into being, they die. So make of that what you will. The creator god had to fight reptiles. He had to fight donkeys. Donkeys, donkey gods, powerful donkeys. He was even injured seriously. He always has to confront his traditional cosmic enemies, which are the elements of chaos, which are not so much evil as just trying to reclaim their lost territory. Because by creating, their space was infringed upon. Everything being this chaotic space in the beginning, by creating, the forces of chaos were pushed to the margins, and they just naturally wanted to come back into that. So you see sort of a dualism here, which is a risky system, because dualism says, oh, it's all male and female are just two sides of the same coin. Good and evil are just two sides of the same coin. Yin and yang, dark and light. But then he has to fight these rebel gods led by Seth. Seth is kind of the troublemaker, the black sheep of the gods. The gods are all kind of a big family. They're all related. They practice endogamy, which is marrying within their own group. And then he has to deal with rebel humans. The creator god eventually gets frail. He needs lots of help all the time. He needs help from Thoth, or Thoth, the god of wisdom. Later, once the Greeks conquer Egypt, well, they kind of conquered Egypt, but they not so violently, but they came to dominate Egypt, and then they absorbed a lot of Egyptian culture, and Thoth became Hermes Trismegistus, from where we get the word Hermeticism. Different gods reign over other lesser gods, but even the creator god has to fear the two goddesses of Sekhmet and Bastet. When they fly into their rages, even he had to take cover and seek help. So we do not have anything resembling the God of the Old Testament. They say that all of the ancient Egyptians' temples were said to be reflections of the first temple erected by the creator god. They would make offerings in these temples as a necessary complement to the act of worship. This practice established a ritualization that gave rise to a new hierarchy in which some gods could eventually become more divine than others. That there should seem to be degrees of divinity is, however, partly an illusion due to the impossibility of finding modern equivalents capable of capturing the real semantic content of the words used by the ancients. Well, okay, that's a bit of a cop-out here. Are we going to be relativist or not? The term we use to translate the Egyptian Netjer, or God, obscures what the Egyptians perceived to be the true nature of the divine. Netjer designated any entity which, because it transcended ordinary human reality, received a cult and became the object of a ritual. Like the gods properly so called, the dead, as well as the king in his cultic functions, were Netjer. And I suppose they mean the real king, the pharaoh, in earthly life. A god was thus more divine than the others because he was more Netjer. That is, because he was the object of a more elaborate or more important cult than others were. The sun god, the source of life, was a particularly good case in point. So anyways, isn't that interesting? Because the god has a cult, therefore he's divine. Shouldn't it be the other way around? A god is divine, therefore he should be worshipped? I don't want to use the word cult. I mean, in this pagan world, yeah, there would be cults, but that's kind of silly, isn't it? I mean, but then you could see that would justify the divinity of the pharaoh, who was just a person, a man, but said to be divine. Why is he divine? Because he's the center of the cult, because he's the king. So he's divine because we worship him. It's like, it's a self-fulfilling, not self-fulfilling prophecy, but you know what I'm trying to say. So that's kind of silly. You'd think it would be the other way around, that divinity would call for worship and not worship make divinity. If you're an ancient Egyptian scholar, maybe I've interpreted it wrong, but that's what they're saying in this book. And these are scholars, these are ancient Egyptian scholars, so I'm just telling you what they say. So continuing, except in the periods of crisis which called for his intervention and sometimes revealed his weaknesses, the supreme deity was generally quite inactive. It was Thoth, the god of wisdom, who, as a rule, exhorted the sovereign to take action or impelled him to make a decision by opportunely reminding him that he was master, that on such and such an occasion he had made a decision he must now enforce. In cases of conflict, the opinion of the Lord of the gods did not necessarily prevail. It might find itself in competition with that of other, more or less important personalities in the divine company. So again, I know he's not the God of the Old Testament, but he's a wuss. Why would he have to consult anyone if he is the creator God? So your universe is created by a guy who doesn't know what he's doing.
Your entire world is created by someone who doesn't know what they're freaking doing.
In this world of the Egyptian gods, the exercise of supreme authority did not depend on the arbitrary will of a single individual. Authority was nevertheless wielded with respect for certain norms, which they refer to loosely as laws. The king of the gods was theoretically the unique source of the law. He had every right to make decisions by himself, yet as a rule they came about only after debate and discussion. Can you imagine the Old Testament gods sitting and convening a discussion with other lesser gods? I mean, there wouldn't be lesser gods, but he's like, I'm not sure what to do. We got to get together in a democratic... We have to have a council, a big council. We all have to get together and share our opinions. And he relies on Thoth constantly. Thoth is supposed to do the right thing. He's kind of like the prime minister or the vizier of the gods. He's the one who promulgates the edicts of the creator god to the rest of the world, to the gods, writing on stone stelae and constantly shuttling back and forth between the other gods and the creator god. Thoth apparently took an oath of allegiance, swearing to fulfill his obligations, but as we'll see, he did not always uphold justice. He did not always do what is right, and neither did the creator god, as we'll see, always care about doing what is right. He was often concerned more with power. And as we'll see, the ancient Egyptian gods resemble somewhat of a soap opera. A soap opera. They are real people or real figures, yet their bodies are said to be made of minerals, but they're also forces of nature. So they are material and immaterial, symbolic and real at the same time. Make of that what you will. Osiris is one of the chief gods. He was murdered by Seth. His body was cut up, put back together, and he's now Lord of the Netherworld, Lord of the Dead. So his dominion, the hereafter, was not subject to any authority based in the world of the living. The god of the dead did not hesitate to remind everyone of this from time to time. The discussions between the creator and Osiris concerning their respective prerogatives have been discussed. So the netherworld came under a separate jurisdiction. Hence, one acquired the right to reside in the hereafter, to enter it or to leave it, only if Osiris made a decision or issued a decree to that effect. Osiris made all decisions required to ensure the well-being of those under his administration, and he did so with complete independence. The creator god is not almighty. What does that say about the world you live in? It's sitting on very shaky foundations. Maybe this is because the Egyptians saw their world as being on shaky foundations, because it all depended on the Nile so much. That doesn't mean it's a good philosophy, though, or a good foundation for a civilization. If the creator god is not supreme, and if he does not have total jurisdiction throughout everything, then how do you determine what is good and what is bad, what is true and what is false? It's all relative. So now we discuss more about Thoth. Thoth was notably responsible for convoking the gods whenever this became necessary. When major upheavals occurred, the creator god sought the advice of his fellow gods, whom he convened, as it were, in extraordinary session. There he presented the problem that had come up and heard the various opinions put forward by the others. Decisions were made in common after a debate. They did not necessarily reflect the creator god's first impulse. Such was the case during the litigation between Horus and Seth, which was said to have gone on for 80 years. Because Osiris was taken out of the picture, Egypt was known as the two lands, Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, and that was supposed to go to Horus, who's another chief god, but Seth took it for himself. Well, everyone knew that Horus was in the right. Horus deserved to have the white crown, I believe it was called, to rule over all of Egypt. But the creator god wanted Seth even though Seth was kind of a bad guy, because the creator god appreciated Seth's valor and murderous capability. So the important gods convened for all this time. Thoth acted as judge, or he presided over the proceedings. And then at one point in the proceeding, when the creator god gets angry, Thoth asks the creator god, "Are we not trying to determine who is in the wrong?" And this remark threw the king of the gods into yet another fit of rage. Unconcerned with the right and wrong of the matter, he wished to see Seth keep power he had acquired by murdering Osiris. And it goes on and on. They try to get other opinions. And we're talking about the forces which govern the universe being a soap opera, litigating each other. Fast forward, the creator god gets insulted again. He sulks. He leaves the court and retreats to his private quarters. So Hathor, who is a female goddess, supposedly supposed to be very beautiful, and she is the daughter of the creator. She goes to see her father and hikes up her skirts to put him in a better mood. This has an uplifting effect on the creator god, and it brings him back to the proceedings, and they eventually manage to resolve the case. So this is facilitated by the creator god being sexually aroused by his own daughter. And this is just normal. This is just accepted part of the Egyptian mythology. No further comment necessary for them. I've already demonstrated to you that the ancient Egyptian creator god was not almighty in any sense. He was weak. He got injured. He had to constantly debate and consult with other people. He relied on Thoth for everything. Oh yes, and then Thoth wasn't always so honest himself. The god of wisdom, apparently, was not always entirely honest. And is that wise? Is that wise? You're the god of wisdom. Now let's keep in mind that Thoth was the arbiter of the gods. He was supposed to preside over any disputes. But we see here Thoth and another god known as Babi were once involved in a dispute whose precise nature is not stated. Babi did not enjoy a very good reputation among the gods. He was violent, lewd, and coarse. He held the post of executioner of the damned. He had some controversy with Thoth, so the important gods came together, and their members were to act not only as judges but also as witnesses for the prosecution. Thoth ushered them into the presence of the king of the gods, who demanded to hear their views, but they remained silent. Babi thereupon decided to go on the offensive. He accused Thoth of pilfering offerings intended for Re. Now they're referring to the creator god as Re. One of Thoth's responsibilities was to apportion offerings among the gods. The accusation was consequently a serious one. It implied that Thoth was not impartial and thus incapable of playing the role of arbiter. When they heard what Babi had to say, the gods then began speaking, saying scandal and lies. I'm not sure who they're accusing here, but then saying that they had seen nothing. This allowed Thoth to declare that Babi was in the wrong, despite the fact that the complaints of the two parties had not yet been examined, nor even so much as stated. And by the way, why does the creator god even need, he's obviously not all-knowing. He is not almighty, he is not all-knowing. The Christian god would not need any of this because he knows everything. He's like Santa Claus. No, I'm just kidding. So obviously the creator god can be tricked. They say the whole affair was rigged. Thoth was simultaneously judge and also party to the action. The supreme divinity did not step in to influence the course of the proceedings, letting himself be swayed by the prevailing view of the matter. Thoth, as we know, was an influential member of the divine company and the creator's right arm. Babi was held in small esteem. His case was disposed of in a travesty of a trial. He continued to speak ill of Thoth, but he was silenced by Thoth, who used his magic powers to humiliate him and hold him up to public ridicule. Babi's accusation was perfectly well-founded. We know this from other sources. The gods assembled were aware of the truth of the matter. Another story is worth telling. It says, a clever, well-informed dead man wanted special protection from Thoth. To force Thoth to grant him this favor, he threatened to reveal a dirty secret if Thoth failed to comply. If you do not listen to what I say, I won't hesitate to reveal that you stole the offerings of the gods on the day of their festival, the night Thoth was completely hidden, that is, the night of the new moon. Thoth, god of the moon, had in fact manipulated time so as to cut the lunar month back to less than the ideal 30 days. He was thus able to divert all unattributed offerings to his own use in the time that elapsed between the shortened and the 30-day month. Thoth was alleged to have served as Seth's accomplice, aiding Seth in stealing certain parts of Osiris's dismembered body, with an eye to putting off the day when it would be reconstituted, thus disturbing the flow of time. Bobby did not make up anything, and the gods knew that he was telling the truth, but still didn't care. So there we have it. Not even Thoth was so great. They were all self-interested. They wanted to be above one another in the hierarchy. They sometimes wanted to overthrow the creator god. Hasta luego, amigos!